Hi everyone, my name is Rebecka Elkert and I'm on the board of Swesif. And I would like to welcome you all on behalf of Swesif to today's seminar. Deforestation. We hear about it. We're all concerned about the speed and how it has surged to its highest levels in recent years since 2008. The Amazon rainforest is, as we know, a vital carbon store that slows down global warming. But the Amazon is also home to about 3 million species, plants and animals. And the scale and speed of the current deforestation is actually very hard to comprehend. What could we as investors do? I'm very keen to hear about the tools I could use as an investor and learn more about that today during this seminar. And with that said, I hand over to Flora Gaber, project manager at AP7, who has made this seminar possible and who is the moderator today.
Thank you very much, Rebecka. My name is Flora Gaber and I work for AP7. AP7 is one of the Swedish government-owned pension funds. It manages the default option in the premium pension system. In the sustainability team, we mainly work with active ownership, and we tend to focus on the systemic issues such as climate change and biodiversity. Our strategy is to collaborate with other investors with the overall aim to reach impact in the real economy. AP7 initiated this webinar since we, like many investors, are realizing the importance of global biological diversity. Also, like many investors, we are struggling with how we should address this issue. While many of you on this webinar probably understand the critical role that healthy ecosystems play in the health of our planet, it's not fully clear how investors should best act to improve the status of them. Therefore, we have invited two organizations today to talk about how they are addressing this issue. These are concrete tools for investors, and this is the whole idea of this webinar. To present tools for investors. This is what you can do concretely. Both organizations are members of our alliances, investor alliances, multi-stakeholder alliances, and AP7 has recently joined these alliances. Both will talk about deforestation, which is one of the main reasons of biodiversity loss. The agenda will start with introduction of the problem. The topic of today is deforestation in Brazil. And like Rebecka said, with an estimated total number of species reaching up to perhaps 3 million, Brazil is regarded as the most biodiverse country in the world. Deforestation is one of the main causes of biodiversity depletion. And Brazil holds the Amazon rainforest as well as the Cerrado, two ecosystems high in biodiversity and under threat of deforestation. So with that introduction, I would like to present Emine Isciel from Storebrand, who will talk about the IPDD Investor Alliance, and Faazi Adam from FAIRR that will talk about the Statement of Support for the Cerrado Manifesto, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative. Our first speaker today is Emine Isciel. She is the head of climate and environment at Storebrand Asset Management since 2018. Prior to joining Storebrand, Emine worked for the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment with multilateral environmental agreements advising the government on sustainability policies and strategies, and leading the work on implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. She has also worked for the United Nations, advising on the SDGs. Emine will talk about the IPDD Alliance. So, welcome, Emine.
Thank you so much, Flora. I'll be sharing a presentation. Sorry. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Like this?
Yes, now it's perfect.
Thank you. And I'm still impressed how, my technical skills haven't improved after 1 year with this COVID. But thank you so much for having me here today. I'll be talking about deforestation and an investor-led initiative called IPDD, which stands for Investors Policy Dialogue on Deforestation. So these are some of the headlines we have seen over the past 2 years. We see a growing investor concern around deforestation and also a demand for companies to take action. I think it was just last week we saw BlackRock announce that they request their investee companies to publish no deforestation policies and minimize their impact on nature. So why is deforestation becoming an emerging issue, and what can investors do about it? That is the question. I'm not going to go into all the ESG risk related to deforestation because I only have 15 minutes, but I just wanted to mention a couple of issues which is important to have in mind. So first of all, it is of course related to climate risk. I think institutional investors are increasingly considering climate-related financial risk and opportunities in their investment decisions. In the past, we have particularly focused on the energy sector, but the significance of deforestation to climate change is becoming more relevant to financial institutions. Deforestation alone accounts for approximately 15% of global emissions. I think it was in IPCC's Land and Climate Report in 2019, highlighting that reduced deforestation is actually vital for the achievement of the Paris Agreement. We also see that all IPCC pathways to limit global warming to under 1.5 degrees require a global halt to deforestation. But deforestation has also contributed to the current biodiversity crisis we are in, and this is also becoming an emerging issue for investors. Approximately 70% of deforestation is connected to agricultural commodity production, and investors are exposed to biodiversity loss primarily through agriculture. And loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services can affect a company's productivity through soil degradation and disruption of hydrological cycles. Brazil could face devastating water shortages, which will have serious consequences as the country is mostly reliant on hydropower. 80% of the terrestrial species lives in the forest. When land is clear, the consequences for animals and plants are quite severe. But the consequences are quite severe also for millions of indigenous peoples and forest-dependent communities. Most rainforest countries lack legal frameworks to secure the rights of indigenous peoples to their traditional lands, territories, and resources. So as you can see, there are a variety of deforestation-related risks that companies face. We often talk about reputational risk, regulatory risk, and operational risk. But I just wanted to draw your attention to the tightening regulatory framework, which is making financing deforestation even more risky for us as investors. For the past year, we have seen some really interesting developments in various countries, but worth mentioning, both in the EU and the UK, laws are being considered to limit their overseas deforestation footprint, which would require companies in the EU and in the UK to show that their products and supply lines are free from deforestation. This will make it difficult for companies to make business with markets that are considered as high risk, such as Brazil and Indonesia. So moving over to the next slide. So deforestation is not a new topic for our investee companies, especially that the ones that are involved in production, trade, and use forest risk commodities, such as palm oil, soy, timber, and cattle. In 2014, governments and companies met in New York and made a joint public commitment to halve deforestation by 2020 and end it by 2030. And what we have seen is that since 2014, many companies have developed commodity-specific policies and announced commitments to end deforestation. A progress report from end of last year showed that we are not on track to meet the 2020 target. And this is also quite evident in our conversations with investee companies, that most of them, they have really good policies in place, but the implementation remains weak. So what is the state of the tropical rainforest? This report was launched just last week from the Rainforest Foundation Norway, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, basically showing that 2/3 of the world's original tropical rainforest cover has been degraded or destroyed by people. And the main drivers, as I've mentioned, are the soft commodities such as palm oil, soy, cattle, and timber, but it's important to also mention mining and infrastructure. The study analyzed tropical rainforests from 2002 to 2019 and found out that since 2002, the area of rainforest lost is greater than the size of France. More than half of the destruction since 2002 has been in the Amazon, followed by Indonesia. And then the question is, what can investors do about it? So, first of all, we can engage with our investee companies, either individually or through collaborative platforms. So Storebrand has been in dialogue with companies on this issue since 2013, and we joined the PRI groups in 2018. PRI is coordinating collaborative investor engagement with companies that have either direct or indirect exposure to commodity-driven deforestation. So there are several work streams, one on soy, cattle, and palm oil, but also in addition, there's a work stream on indirect financing where investors can engage with banks in Asia, which often provide loans to palm oil companies. And I think until recent times, investor engagement has largely been limited to dialogue with companies. It was until the IPDD was formed. Around this time last year in May, we decided in Storebrand to send a letter to the Brazilian embassy in Norway to express concern around escalating deforestation and that this was creating uncertainty about conditions for investing in the country. We know that Brazil has a very good track record of combating deforestation, while at the same time providing favorable conditions for business and investments. And this is quite complementary to the work we're doing with corporates. So I think we came to the recognition that companies and investors can only play their role in a sustainable economy if governments are setting the right framework. Whether the topic is environment or health, governments have a key role to play to promote and support sustainable business practices. And this letter was the start of the initiative, which is called IPDD. So basically, in a very short time, we managed to mobilize a group of international investors, and some of you are together with us at this webinar today. And in June 2020, we sent an open letter to the Brazilian embassies in all our home countries. I think we were represented in 9 countries. The letter expressed our concerns over escalating deforestation in recent years, combined with concerns about weakening environmental and human rights policies, as well as lack of effective enforcement. I think it is quite fair to say that we were not sure what the feedback would be and quite surprised by the immediate and high level of response. I remember the letters were sent on a Monday morning in June, and within a few days, the governor of the central bank reached out to Storebrand and wanted to understand some of our concerns. He offered a meeting with the Amazon Council, chaired by the Vice President Mourão. So, within a few weeks, we had a meeting with the Vice President Mourão, the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Environment, and the Foreign Affairs. And some promises were made from their side. From our side, we expressed 5 tangible and concrete outcomes with clear link to investment risks. We explained that we are concerned about the financial impact that deforestation may have on our clients and investee companies by potentially increasing reputational, operational, and regulatory risk. Right after our meeting, Bolsonaro announced a 120-day Amazon fire ban. So here at this slide, you can see all the meetings that we had since the beginning of the initiative. I think I also wanted to mention a meeting we had with the President of the Congress which I personally believe was a very important meeting. His name is Rodrigo Maya, and he used to be the president of the Congress until February this year. He has been a central figure in ensuring that the system of check and balances is effective, and that the legislative is able to block some of the more controversial measures proposed by the Bolsonaro government. There was particularly one controversial measure we were concerned about, which would legalize the private occupation of public land in the Amazon. We had a meeting with him in July or August last year, and the president of the Congress, he made a public promise that the Congress will not vote on any controversial matters related to the environment that may damage Brazil's image abroad. I'm not going to go into the details of all the meetings, but the important question is, did we have any impact? Given IPDD was only formalized in July 2020, I think it remains too early to see any actual progress against the 5 outcomes of the Brazil workstream. And it is also particularly true when it comes to such a complex issue as deforestation and engaging at the government and policy level, given the many different stakeholders and dynamics involved in Brazil. And currently, there's also a COVID crisis going on. However, I think it's not to say that it has not had an impact in other ways, which are just as important in terms of increased awareness and greater engagement from key stakeholders. The government demonstrates its responsiveness to the investor concerns. They did not need to meet us. While the messaging from the top is not always encouraging to our efforts, the IPD has been encouraged that this does not run through the entire government. For example, in September last year, we had a meeting with the governor of the central bank, and they launched a new sustainability agenda. At a meeting beginning of this year, we had a second meeting with Vice President Morale, chair of the Amazon Council. He presented a strategic plan for us on how to fight illegal deforestation and confirmed that the council shares the objectives of IPDD. And at a recent meeting in March this year, the National Treasury of Brazil informed they're currently working on ESG framework and also working on giving investment funds and rating agencies more data and clarification on ESG topics. I think also 2 years ago, discussions and requests on deforestation would probably be dismissed by the Bolsonaro government as NGO rhetorics or protectionism. But we have, as an investor coalition, successfully conveyed to the government that financial market participants consider issues like deforestation to be material risks. Countries face losing access to capital markets or face higher borrowing costs if they do not ensure effective management and protection of natural resources. But most importantly, I think we have created a space, I don't know if I would call it a safe space for other stakeholders, especially in Brazil, also working in this area, who share similar concerns as us, to reinforce their messaging and align their efforts. We witnessed something really interesting right after the letter went out. We had CEOs of Brazilian companies in the agricultural sectors, in Brazil, sending, making similar requests as IPDD. We had former government ministries, I think it was the ex-finance ministers, requesting similar asks. And then we had the 3 major banks in Brazil entering into a dialogue with the vice president on the protection of the rainforests. So this was a very interesting development to see, and none of these actions were coordinated in any way. So currently, we